Excuse me. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our meeting of Strong Communities Select. May I welcome everybody back after the summer recess, and I trust you all had happy holidays. May I also thank Paula and Hazel, especially Paula for holding the fort whilst Hazel was on holiday. So thank you for that, Paula. So I think it would be as well if we start by introducing ourselves. I'm Jane Pratt, Chairman of the Select. And if we can move to Councillor Eason and we can just introduce ourselves. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Councillor Tony Eason, Dewstoke Caldecott, Member of the Committee.
Good morning. Richard Roden, Dixon with Osbaston, Member of the Committee.
Good morning, Linda Guppy, Member of the Committee, Member for Roggett.
Good morning, Councillor Alan Davis, Member for Greenley and Ward in Caldecott, and a Member of the Committee.
Good morning, Councillor Val Smith for Llanbaddock Ward.
Oh, good morning, Liz Williams, one of the Management Accountants in Mark Hawcroft and Joy's team. I'm Mark. I was Mark last time as well. I'm going to be getting a compliment.
Good morning, Roger Hoggins, Head of Operations.
Hazel Olet, Scrutiny. Paula Harris, Democratic Services.
Thank you very much. If we could have any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies this morning from County Councillor Anne Webb.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chairman. Under the revenue or somewhere, I'm a governor of Usk School and have an involvement with Goitre School grandchildren.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. The Open Public Forum, we don't have any members of the public here at the moment. So we'll move on to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on Thursday, the 20th of July. So I'll take it page by page. Page 1.
Are you doing the stop accuracy or for asking questions? I wasn't able to attend the meeting, but I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask on the minutes.
Yes, certainly. So if you'd like to stop either on accuracy or a question.
I'll do it now as you work through, Chairman, if you like. So on page 2, I've got alongside the Road Safety Task and Finish Group is considered county-wide, and it was due to meet. That was on the first paragraph, and I've got alongside did it. Followed by another one, third paragraph down, a public meeting on speeding for town and community council members to attend in September. Did that actually occur? And further, the next paragraph down. Yes, that was done. There was another one at the bottom, reference the Borough Theatre, the alternative delivery model. A member question what proposals are under consideration to run the Borough Theatre in the future. Has there been any response to that?
Thank you for those questions. If we take them one at a time from the first one, the Safety Task and Finish group did meet. Yes, we met in the summer, didn't we?
Yeah. But not in September.
I think it was saying. Are you talking about the public workshop? We haven't had another meeting yet. That's still on.
Right. That's
Can
what I
that?
assumed was coming.
Have we any dates for that?
We need to set a date for the public workshop. We were anticipating October. I think it's going to be near the latter end of October, beginning of November now, because unfortunately one of our more valued members of the task group has been unwell and has not been able to meet with us. We were hoping to put together a sort of draft process to discuss at the workshop, and we've not been able to meet over the summer and do that yet. But I think we still plan to have a task group meeting with members again to discuss the format for the public public workshop, and then we will set a date at that meeting for the public workshop.
If I can come back, Chairman, the reason I raise this, at the beginning of our County Council meeting last week, there were 2 petitions referenced speeding. I've also been approached by 2 individuals from the community who actually took the trouble to come to this County Council meeting to raise the issues of speeding. And just saying to me, quite frankly, Councillor, nothing's happened, has it? The publican who was assured that his verges would be cut and various things would be done, nobody's gone back to him, nothing's been done, and the other issues down the road. It's very, very disappointing, because this is one of the biggest issues, our infrastructure under the safety, and we seem to be doing, as a council, absolutely nothing. I'm very disappointed. I just tell the members of the public I am trying.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. And I think Mr. Roger Hoggins, if you'd like to respond to Val's comments there.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Member of the public you refer to was...
The publican first. First individuals who came were not the club down the road, the BAE club, as I think it's called, the Glasgow it's called now. The other was a member of the public at Llanbaddock. Llanbaddock Community Council certainly are interested in the issues in that area. But when you then receive 2 petitions at the beginning of a council, and I look at the history of my representation from the public over the years, and I look back and think this has been going on for 30 years outside, and we've done nothing. And we're going to see an increase in traffic on this road again. But that's relevant to this. But the whole policy, the whole idea of looking at the safety of roads, of how we treat roads in this county, we're just not tackling. If I look at the other side of my ward, the 50 mile an hour that was instituted between Llancaio and Usk, it was to be monitored. I'm not aware of any monitoring, but it's a thing that does concern me and the public.
Councillor Eason.
Roger can respond probably afterwards. I couldn't attend the 7-side meeting yesterday morning, but I believe a member of the public that was there on the same subject about speeding, speed limits, HGV vehicles on narrow roads. So yes, it's a matter that we've got to tackle somehow. We've got to get an answer for it somehow. So I don't know if Paula can confirm that the member of the public did raise this yesterday morning.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Roger, did you want to come back?
The only point I would like to make, Madam Chairman, is the road safety group has been established to look at this, and both councillors are valued members of that group. Councillor Smith is quite right. We have had 2 more petitions in surrounding road traffic issues. In some instances, speeding. Sometimes it's pedestrian safety. It's all integrated. But I think it'll have to go through your road safety group to come up with a policy which suits the authority. It is very difficult to respond to individual petitions and come up with a policy which may be applied throughout the authority. And I would also suggest to you that to respond to individual petitions may also have some level of risk associated with that. We have no rules or regulations over whether a petition should or should not be responded to, other than it has to come to either a committee or the cabinet for members to be made aware of what is in the petition. This does happen, but in not all instances do you act upon individual petitions. The other point I would make in regard to ROF Glasgow, the Glasgow Social Club, is that highway is cut to the same frequencies as other highways. I do pass it on a regular basis. I believe they're cutting it themselves as well to improve the actual access to their property. So whilst the individual raised it, and it was noted by ourselves, and cuts were carried out, there's no reason, there's no accident history which surrounds that, which suggests that we should be cutting that on more regular frequency. And without that, it's very difficult for officers to respond to each individual request because we don't have the resources available to do so on a ad hoc basis. So I think, and I'm not trying to stall the matter, but I do think it's for members through the road safety group to take this point on board in terms of setting a policy for the authority rather than ad hoc. We nevertheless have to respond to individual petitions. We will do so. The other point I would make in relation to Lambaddock, we have had a member of the public attend. I half expected him to be here again today. But he is aware that, as is Lambaddock Community Council, that we are working in conjunction with us Town Council as well in relation to speeding matters in Woodside, Lambaddock and Usk Town itself. So there is work taking place with that, and Lambaddock Community Council has attended those meetings which have taken place already. So it's unfortunate that they believe nothing's happening, but they have been at those meetings.
Thank you very much. I think obviously it's very important that we set up the task and finish group as quickly as we can, and that the workshop is organised and that members of Llanbaddock and other community councils are invited along. Are you happy with that, Councillor Smith?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Thank you, Roger.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Roger's quite... One thing that was recognised in that Road Safety Committee was that we don't really have a set procedure that people can follow and a priority system where things can be prioritised. There are some issues, Roger, as you know. There's communication issues, which I've raised with you about an issue in Caldicot. And we really is having that procedure that people know can go through and it can be dealt with. I'm still unclear about what the answer is to that particular question, but it is quite a serious one, and I think it highlights the fact that really we need to review the procedure and look at how these things are highlighted. So I think you're quite right there. Thank you.
If you could come back. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Point well made by Councillor Davies, because at present I'd have to say that officers do receive numerous requests through different avenues. I'm presently working with other officers to try and put these together into a programme of projects and to thereby offer some priority and some transparency to members as well, so as they don't have to keep asking individuals, where are we with this, how far has it got? We are going to develop a programme management system which will be available to yourselves as well, I would like to see, so as you can see where they are in terms of other priorities which are coming through, because as well as yourselves, other members are obviously raising issues as well. And I would readily admit that they come in on an ad hoc basis, and we haven't got 100% control on where they are, what progress is being made, where the funding's coming from, and who's managing it. In many instances we have, but obviously it's the ones which we haven't, which float to the top, and you think, oh, we still haven't dealt with that matter. So I am at the moment trying to develop a system whereby we can control these things as they come in, be they a road safety issue, be they a signing issue, be they a particular project. So as you have more, you can see better what's coming in and where it sits within our priority. And we may even then have to work out with yourselves how we prioritise those jobs, because they are coming in. Each individual member has their ward issues which come in. We then dutifully note those down, but we're not, I'd have to say and admit that we're not getting on top of actually managing them as they come in and prioritising them. And I think there's a piece of work to be done around that and to be matched against the resources which we have available to do that as well.
Thank you, Roger. Before I bring Councillor Smith in, I'm mindful that we're going through the minutes, and if we're not careful, we're going to digress, and this isn't the forum for discussing all these issues as much as we'd like to.
No, I'm aware of that, Chairman, but I raise this because I could not make that last meeting, and these are issues that are important. And I also recognise the really severe constraints that this department works under financially. I don't believe they have the financial resources. I don't believe they have the manpower either to do the job that they would like to see done. And that is the way we will sell Monmouth, by having a decent looking county.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and I think that is obviously a point to bring up when we go through the next item. Looking at the minutes, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, 7, 8 and 9. Are you happy that these minutes are a true record? Yes, if I can have a proposer. Laura, and a seconder, Councillor Guppy. All in favour? Thank you. So, yeah, well, we're now going to move on to agenda item 6, which is the Revenue and Capital Monitoring Outturn Statement. And I'd like to invite the officer, Liz Williams, to speak. And thank you very much, Liz, for coming along to us today at such short notice to present this item.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is a financial outturn position as at month 2, which is period 1. The next one won't be until month 7, which will be period 2. If I can take you, there's a financial table there, but if you go to 3.16, which is the Stronger Communities Select Portfolio, I'll just talk through the main headlines and then take any questions. This 5 sections is split up into the Chief Exec's unit of forecast as at month 2 at 496 overspend. The Resources Directorate a £19,000 overspend. The corporate, however, has got a 475 underspend, as has appropriations a £250,000 underspend and financing of 380 underspend. Obviously, all that together is bringing in a forecasted an underspend position of 380 of a net 381. So, I mean, I can read through all this, or I can take questions from you and answer as best.
So, I'm not quite sure if there's a typo on 3.16 where it says a small overspend, grocery supplies for catering, 36,000, which that's not small. But I think it should be 8,000, which is highlighted further down, which I thought I highlighted further down in the report. So I just want clarification, really, or could it be clarified that it's 8,000 or 38,000?
So where is it, sorry, in 3.16?
3.16. Right, it's...
Under which heading?
Chief Executive.
Chief Executive, yeah, I've got it here. It's Chief
legal
in the
10K.
first one, Chief Executive and unit, which are, 2 lines up, 38,000, sorry, not 36. And then under Head of Operations, Context and Commentary, it says school catering 8,000, increase in food costs.
Madam Chairman, I would imagine
I think it's a typo,
Yeah.
but when it says small 30, I think, oh.
Yeah.
But then reading down, so just
If I
Yeah.
may very briefly
Yeah.
on that, Madam Chairman.
it's easy typo.
The 38,000 will be in relation to food for primary sector school meals. The terminology, 38 grand isn't a small amount. In the context of the budget, which is about 1.1 million, it's termed in that way, but I appreciate the point. It's not a small amount.
No, I think it should be 8. It says in the report for the down is 8,000.
8, is it?
Yeah, it's page Head of Operations, Content and Commentary.
That says grocery supplies and catering. The other one is food costs. So maybe there's something more included in that 38.
Okay.
If I can just remind members on 2.3 and 2.4 what we've been asked to do, that we note the low level of earmark reserves, which will severely reduce the flexibility the Council has in meeting the financial challenges of reducing settlements and consequent need to redesign services, and that members note the significant forecast reduction in the overall school balance and supports the continuing work with schools to ensure the Council's fairer funding scheme requirements are met, etc. Councillor Roden, did you have a question for Ms Williams?
Yes. Basically, the situation appears to be getting worse financially. And there are opportunities that we need to grasp in terms of increasing efficiencies and looking for alternative funds. Perhaps we should be raising things with the Welsh Government in order to increase funds. But where will this actually end if we don't get increased funds? I'm quite concerned about the level and standard of the services in the future.
Well, obviously, every year the council has to set a balanced budget, and in order to set a balanced budget, you can only set a budget on what resources we have, financial resources we have, and I think this is why it's put on the front of the report that there are no levels of reserves that we can rely on. So I guess that's the challenge going forward, is setting a budget and deciding on which ways, which sections take priority and how we move forward with working in a challenging environment, really, with cuts going nationally.
Yeah, if I can just, if you could just turn your microphone off and use it when. Thank you very much. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Roden?
I think that as a council, we have a large number of challenges ahead of us. The budget setting is going to be extremely difficult, and I think that we need to explore further how we can actually obtain more funding in the future. And I think that might be at chief executive level, it might be at government level, but I'm sure that we should be pursuing every avenue that we can for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roden. Councillor Smith?
Can I thank you for the first column, the initial annual budget on your figures, which I hope you'll see for every report, so at the end of the year we can actually see a true reflection of what the service cost us, because I've always said, yes, they're honest environments or whatever, but it gives clarity. I think the point that the members made at the back is very important. I've heard on numbers of times members appealing for a list of the statutory duties that we have to perform and the discretionary ones that we do. That list has never, to my knowledge, appeared, because I think as a council we need to sit back and seriously address what we have to do, how we're going to do it, and anything that's left over we then look at non-statutory duties. I've heard the figure, well, we deliver over 600 services. Okay, let's let all elected members know what those 600 services plus are, and then in the light of that information we can decide where the money's going better. I find it very frustrating at times, some things that we look at and I think, well, why are we doing this? But I honestly think that list would be really, really useful to members. So thank you, Chairman, but thank you, Liz, for that first column.
So you would like us to ask Councillor Smith for a list that would give us that information as members? Well, we'll have another go. Thank you for your question. Councillor Eason.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the last council, or the latter part of the last council, we had a lot of concerns about street lighting, converting street lighting to LEDs, etc., etc. A lot of lights weren't going off, but we were assured by Mr Hoggins that the cost savings would be there in the long term, and I believe that most of the street lights have been sort of sorted. There's still some on. But you're showing an overspend of 85k due to the energy rising costs. Now, I would have thought that with going to LED lights, the overcharge should not be there, or where's it come from, in other words, and also on the basis that we have contracts with whoever it may be on a set cost, but in the future it will be on usage. So I just wonder whether you can explain why our street lighting costs are increasing due to energy rising, why we haven't made any savings by going to LED lights, and perhaps we can have some enlightenment on where we're going with street lighting.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chairman. Street lighting, we are investing in LED street lights, and we are investing further this year. We've taken out another interest-free loan to install more LED street lights. To do so, the budget becomes reduced because we take our energy money, which we are saving, and then invest that into loans to put in LED lighting. However, the energy companies or the authorities go out to tender for energy as well. And energy in this financial year has increased, I believe on street lighting is 18%, but generally it's been 15%. That mightn't be something you see in the domestic market, but the way local authorities and other public sector bodies buy energy, it is a phenomenon which you will see because they buy over a certain number of years. So when you do get a new contract out, the hike can be significant. So we are in the investment in LED is undoubtedly the right thing to do because it's an old adage, but it probably holds true. Energy is only going to ever go up. So to reduce our energy demand is the right thing to do. However, we are taking aside the money which we spend on energy to pay for the lights. So when the energy does go up, it's hitting what budget is remained, hence that pressure which you are seeing. I hope that helps members to some degree to understand.
Sort of, Chair, but what you're suggesting is that by going to LED lighting, your budget for that sector is reduced. And by reducing your sector, you've still now got an overspend on your budget, which you brought in because you had LED lighting. Is it paying Roger to pay Paul?
My fault, Madam Chairman. In the street lighting budget, there is a budget for energy. I can't remember exactly what it is. It may be £320,000. When we invest in LED, we have to buy those LED lights. So what we do is we may take £40,000 out of the energy budget because that's what we anticipate the reduction in energy demand is going to be. And we use that £40,000 to spend on the loan for the LED lights. So our energy budget is now reduced to £280,000. The energy companies then come along and say your energy bill for the coming 12 months, 2 years, is going to be 18% higher than what it was before. So on the £280,000, the remaining budget, we find it an increase on that budget. And hence the figure here where we're anticipating that our remaining energy budget is going to be insufficient because the cost of energy, albeit there's a reduced amount, has gone up. So that's how it's hitting it. I'll try again if that makes sense.
I understand all that, Chair. But by investing in LED street lighting, and at the time we were paying a set cost to the energy providers, irrespective of usage, because you always used to say it's not cost us anything, the lights are on all night, they're paying for it. And we were then going down to a position of, in the near future, or now particularly, where we're paying by usage. If we're paying by usage, I would have thought that by going to LED lighting, which is maybe 30, 40, 50% more efficient, that we shouldn't be in a position of having an energy budget which has gone, energy costs which have gone over budget. It doesn't match up in my mind.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Did you want to come back?
Yes, if I may, Madam Chairman. Yes, to explain that, and I'm sorry, you did pick it up on the first time. At present, we pay for energy and unmetered. In other words, we tell the energy companies what lights we have. There's all different designs of lights, different types of lights, and they've all got different levels of energy consumption. We tell them what we have and how long they are on for. From that, they calculate the amount of energy we are using. So when we tell them that the lights in Osbaston Road are going to be on from 11 o'clock at night until 6 a.m. in the morning, and they are SOX 25s, a particular design of light, they will calculate what the energy consumption is on that. The fact that those lights are burning all day is irrelevant to that bill, because we've told them what they're supposed to be burning. We're not paying on a meter, we're paying on what we tell them they use. Now the issue about LEDs, we install LEDs, we tell them what they are going to be, what hours they are going to be burning. So they will reduce our energy bill accordingly. So nevertheless, even though we're using less energy overall, the cost of energy goes up per unit. So our reduced energy bill has now got an increased cost. They've taken account of what we're burning by terms of what lights we've got and how many hours they're burning. But the cost of energy is going up anyway, and that's what's hitting our budget. It is a little bit confusing, but I hope that helps members to some degree.
Thank you very much, Roger. I think this is probably something we're going to have to revisit. Are you happy with that, Councillor Easton, or you're not happy with it? But I must say, from my personal point of view, in my ward, I was it was very helpful to meet with the officer who came out, who's responsible. And if you've got any issues concerning lights, now's the time to get back to him. If there's areas where you want the lights left on or where they're on and they shouldn't be, it's worth making a note and getting back to him as soon as you can. Are there any other questions? Councillor Davis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to refer to the comment about extra funding. I think it's very unlikely that there's going to be extra funding from the UK government to the Welsh government, and therefore from the Welsh government. So what we really need to look at is the efficiency of our operations. And we've spoken about procurement and things like that. And there are a number of people who have experience in business within this council. Our priority, my priority, is those services for our residents, and anything we can do to provide more income in order that the funds are there to spend on those facilities. That's what we need to do. There are a number of things that private companies do to reduce costs and provide more finance for these things. I think there's been an offer for, from the Economy and Development Committee for those business people to have an input. And I think, one of the things I find difficulty coming to terms with in council is the length of time it takes to make a decision. I think you're in the position now where these decisions need to be made quickly. There is a lot of money to be saved, and I would hope that not only this committee but all the other committees will push for those things to be put in place, because I don't think that our senior officers are in a position to take that workload on as well as their day-to-day workload. There needs to be help professional help put in place. There's a lot of money to be saved that we can put into services. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Would you like to respond?
Perhaps not directly to Councillor Davis's point, but perhaps in terms of what we're looking at here, it may be of help to members. What we're looking at is the month 2 projected forecast for the rest of the year. There's a health warning to go around projecting 12 months on the basis of 2 months spend. So, and as the year goes on, you will get further reports. Are they coming at month 5?
Month 7 will be next period.
Month 7, you'll see another one. At which time we'll have more confidence in terms of what we're reporting to you, and you'll have more confidence in what the outturn eventually may be. So this is an early report in relation to cost within this year and what officers are projecting just at the moment. I think the points made by Councillor Davis and Councillor Roden are well made, and at some point you will be, as a committee, scrutinising the budget proposals for 18-19. And normally they come in around December, I believe. So it's at that point when you will be looking in much greater detail, I suspect, in what proposals are coming forward from Cabinet's draft budget proposals for the coming year, when the points which you make in relation to efficiencies and the like are something you may wish to feed in to that exercise at that time. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but actually what you're looking at is month 2 of a 12-month period. So sometimes there's a little bit of caution and to be taken.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, but we're talking, you know, there's a sense of urgency needed, I suggest. Okay, and I think perhaps that's something that we really need to look at. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Liz? Councillor Smith.
Strictly not our strong communities, but it obviously reflects. The reference to City Deal, I know it's not strong communities, it's on page 46 on my hard copy. I was under the impression that there was no financial contribution required from Monmouth until some years ahead. There are no figures or anything there, is it? It's just the 10 authorities in Cardiff City region looking at potential 1.2 billion, and then the conclusion is to start for us to start reflecting on the commitment in our medium-term financial plan. Now, when do the financial implications of the City Deal actually hit us? I couldn't in my mind remember.
I know that obviously Cardiff are taking it as the lead authority.
Yes.
The finances are going through Cardiff as the lead authority on finance.
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, the medium-term financial plan obviously is looking forward.
That's looking forward. No, it was the actual financial implications that when it was discussed, I was under the impression it was something like sort of moving to the 2020s before we had to start making financial contributions, which obviously come into our future financial plans, but I'd like to know in my mind when we actually do feel those pinches. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I know that Liz has come in at short notice, and perhaps that's a question you'd like to investigate and come back to us as soon as you can.
Because that's got a bearing on how we look at the future. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, members, for your very valued and valid questions. And I think really just to sum up, I think there is great concern in this committee about the challenges facing the council and the concern about the enterprise and the operations department that this committee covers, which have obviously been cut to the bone, and we genuinely are concerned about where the cuts are going to come in the future. So thank you very much indeed. And we're now going to move on to our next item, which will be People's Services Annual Report. I'm mindful that we do have a member of the public at the back of the council chamber. Am I correct? Yes, thank you very much for coming. We can discuss the... Have you come along for the item on obstructions in the highway? Well, thank you very much for attending. And if you're happy, we'll deal with that item after the next one. Thank you. So if I can invite the officers that are here to present the People's Services Annual Report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Tracy Harry. I'm Head of People Services. The report in front of you today is...
If you could come down to the front, please.
Yeah,
thank you very much. It's just better for clarity for those watching us on the live stream. Thank you. And if officers would like to introduce themselves, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tracy Harry. I'm Head of People Services and Information Governance.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sally Thomas and I'm the HR Manager.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Owen Wills. I've worked in the Partnerships and Community Development team with responsibility for volunteering and the Community Leadership Programme.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The report you've got in front of you today is our second People Services annual report. Basically, it's a reflection of the activity that we've been engaged in throughout the year. As I've said in my introduction, what we're trying to do as a support service is use evidence and data to inform our actions throughout the year. It's been an incredibly busy year, and I'd like to congratulate this team in a public forum in terms of the hard work that they've been engaged in. In terms of our activity, well, the report covers that, so I shan't go into any details. But basically, in terms of what we've heard throughout the year, the evidence that we've gathered, we've done huge amounts of work in improving our data around workforce. We now have not only a sickness dashboard, we have a workforce dashboard which provides lots of information around gender, the wage split of the organisation, the age profile, sickness profile of the organisation, which helps us to assist managers across the organisation to workforce plan for the future, to look at their sickness absence, the profile of their sickness absence, and to get better at addressing it. In my introduction, I've identified what our priorities are for the current year, and they are workforce planning. Sickness absence remains a big issue for us as an authority, and our focus for this year is psychological absence and looking at better ways to prevent it, identify it early on, and then take action to get people back into the workplace or even prevent them from for going on sick in the first instance. The second priority for this year is health and well-being. Our staff are telling us that we've lost that focus on health and well-being, and so we've got a workforce plan, a health and well-being plan now, which is looking at a range of activities that our staff have told us are important to them, and it's about improving the well-being of our organisation. Skills and knowledge clearly continues to be a priority for us as we're moving forward. There are less of us in the organisation, and we need to find new ways of working. Our digital skills need to improve. Our knowledge around transformation, etc., needs to improve. So we're focusing on that in the current year as well. I don't mean to go on any longer, but myself and my colleagues are happy to take any questions that you may have on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Before we take questions, I would just like to make one comment. Obviously, there was no cover report with this item. So I wonder if you can just confirm to the members the reason for bringing it to this committee and any points you want to highlight and what you would like to see as an outcome from bringing it to this committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Apologies for no covering report. I did ask whether or not I needed to do a covering report, but hopefully the introduction clarifies what's the content of the report. What I'm looking for from members today is basically that you can acknowledge the work and the activity that's happening in People Services, but from your own views of what you see happening in the organisation, any concerns that you may have with regard to the content, any activity you think that we potentially should be engaged in that we're not reflecting in our priorities for the coming year, or anything that's actually in the report that you have concerns about, then please do ask any questions.
Thank you. So I'll take a question first of all from Councillor Guppy and then Councillor Laura Jones.
Thank you for the report. It's really detailed. But when I read it, I wasn't quite sure who the report was for. Was it for staff or was it for the community? There's a lot about volunteering. And there's a couple of observations and comments. They seem quite negative, but it's sort of personal, but sort of taking a step back. And if I was a member of public reading this, this council upholds their work in responding to mental health and acknowledging it within the workplace. But in your opening statement, there's a typo error anyway, but you put about psychological illness, okay? I'm not quite sure that's the term that this council should be using. It should be about mental health. And I really think, that sickness is a problem, and you put psychological illnesses. I think that term needs to be taken out, and we need to substitute it for mental health to go with what this council is trying to sort of stand up for. And also sort of the juggling on this report, I wasn't quite sure, is this for the staff, is this for public? There's an awful lot of work being done, and, you know, it does tell the public that. So that's sort of general observations. And sort of one reason for me bringing this comment to committee is about the Evolve programme, which seems a really good programme, but I read it, and I didn't know who it was for. Is it for the council members? Is it for volunteers? Is it for the community? So it's just not sort of getting it for me. I understand that volunteers can access it, but it doesn't say here, so it's not selling itself enough. So it's just my, you know, observations really.
Thank you, Councillor Guppy. If you'd like to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Guppy. I think the comment around psychological illness and changing that to mental well-being, I think, is an excellent comment, and I will revise that. In terms of the, you know, what is the audience for this report? It is a difficult one because it's actually internal for to demonstrate to our workforce what we've been doing. It gives them the opportunity to feed back. But obviously, this committee has the responsibility in the portfolio for people's services. So as much as anything, it's probably an information item for you to understand exactly what we've been engaged in and to make you know, observations like you've just made, really. So thank you for that. In terms of the Evolve programme, actually, we've got our first cohort happening this week, and it will focus on officers across the workforce. At some point we may involve volunteers, and they are very welcome. And I take your point that that's not clear, but it is aimed at anybody in the workforce. The current cohort is an absolute range of officers, and they're focusing on improving customer services across the whole organisation, and so they're working this week on identifying the problems that we will look to solve and coming up with ideas in terms of how we can solve them. So that first cohort is happening this week, but I take your point about it not being clear. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Guppy? Councillor Jones.
Hello, thank you. I just want to firstly welcome the work that you're doing and going to do, particularly your focus on psychological illness, which Councillor Guppy took the words out of my mouth. It should be termed as mental health, especially as that's in line with WAG and the Welsh Assembly Government, etc. So it's very important that we do that, because I think psychological illness creates a stigma that you want to avoid. And as a council, we want to avoid. I'm just wondering on that. I think that as a priority is very important to me. I've seen it in the workplace, in the Welsh Assembly Government and here. And I was just wondering what you've done to date and what plans you do have in the future for that in a bit more detail. Could you explain to us? And are there examples of best practice out there from work done in other councils or other organisations that you're going to learn from rather than reinventing the wheel? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. If you'd like to respond.
Hi, I'm happy to take that question. It's been one of passion for People Services HR to take this forward, and I think where we started from as a starting point is to engage with the workforce in terms of revised workflows and an understanding for the organisation to understand, you know, what to expect in terms of processes as well that might feel uneasy for people. So we started with engaging on a new workflow and policy development that's very much a toolkit. So that's a supportive piece of work that we've engaged on. And you know, across People Services, it's HR and training. So we have concentrated on courses and training sessions around mental health and mental well-being. We've also recently developed a group called Go-To People, where, you know, it can be the case that people are a little bit nervous about coming to HR. You know, who do they go to if there's, you know, there's not a massive problem, but there are issues that are causing them some distress or they feel uncomfortable about. again, looking to be proactive rather than reacting and waiting till somebody goes off. We all know that people feel comfortable sometimes approaching different people in the organisation. We don't have to have labels about who we are. So we've recently created that group, or establishing that group throughout the organisation. And to help, I think a really big thing for us in HR is to support managers to manage issues within the workplace well and effectively. So in terms of that, what HR are looking to develop as well in terms of forward thinking is groups, Skype groups actually, where managers don't have to travel from Mega or to ESC or to Raglan Training Centre, wherever managers may be based. They can Skype into a 2-hour session with a couple of HR guys to answer any questions in a supportive environment, so that they become confident in dealing with issues that people have within the workplace. So again, not waiting until issues become entrenched or so difficult that actually the individual feels they've got no other alternative other than to go off work and sign off poorly. We're very much looking at being proactive rather than reactive. So it's just a snapshot, and I hope that helps.
Thank you, Sally. If you'd like, did you want to come in, Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. If I could just add to that, really. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a lot more data available to us now. And some of the approach that Sally's using with her team in terms of business partnering with managers, and before we go into those meetings, is looking at what the data is telling us, because sometimes it may be that actually there's a pattern forming in a particular service area, and we might have actually that manager might need some help and support in terms of, the team seems to be a trend in a particular area. So what are we going to do to assist that manager and support that manager in terms of improving their practice? And I think across Wales it's recognised that mental health is a big issue. And I was just at a meeting last week of HR directors, and it's actually going to form the basis of one of our we have quarterly get-togethers, and one of the items that we will be focusing on is sharing best practice around how we can better deal with mental health issues across the organisation, because clearly it's something that we do need to get better on. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to come back?
Can I just say that I welcome what you're saying? That's very encouraging. I think that this whole process needs to be speeded up at a rate of knots, I must say. I hope these things are happening now, especially the sharing best practice. It's something we need to put into place. I think mental health should be treated as seriously as a physical illness of some sort, and being given the same priority and understanding. But you're right, it's a two-way street. It's very hard for someone to admit most of the time that they have mental health problems, but then to admit it to someone and then not know how to take that forward is, I think, been a barrier for a long time, and it's not normally that person's fault either. So that's very encouraging that you're tackling that side of things. I love that you're proactive rather than reactive. I think that is the basis of how we need to take things forward. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. If we can next take a question from Councillor Easton and then from Councillor Davis.
Thank you once again, Chair. I got two questions. One is regarding the staff turnover. We lost nearly 300 last year, but yet we employed 370. Of those who left, how many took on redundancy? And of those who went, in any case, were training programs in place to allow people to cross-match into other work within the council to be in a position of not having to employ other people? That's just a general one on that. The other one is to do with the 40% of our employees who are full-time. And I'm not quite sure how it works for the 60% of part-time employees, but agile working, has agile working, or is agile working a success? Has it got pitfalls in as much as by being agile, you tend to be available more frequently than you would have been if you were on a 9-to-5 job? And I'm not suggesting everyone's on 9-to-5, but I would imagine that the full-time employees who are ticking over every day are the ones more prone to fall into sickness because of the agile working regime, whereby they may be half expected to be answering messages late at night, early in the morning. I'm not quite sure how that fits in with the 60% of part-time employees. I don't quite know what sort of roles they have and how they fit them in, like the CO democratic services. But it does concern me that we get emails at 7, 8 o'clock at night. There must be, in my mind, within agile working, a limit to what agile working means. And is this having a problem with sickness and stress? What are your comments on
that? Sally might want to come in as well. But certainly, there were a number of questions in there. The first one around turnover. I haven't got the answer to that in terms of the reasons why people have left to hand, but I can get you some data on that, so that's not a problem. In terms of if somebody is made redundant, if their post is being made redundant, then we have our redundancy policy, which is at risk. Redundancy is the very last option. We would look to redeploy an individual to another post across the organisation, and right up to the point where their 3 months comes to an end, and if they have been unsuccessful at being redeployed, then redundancy would occur, but that is the very last option. We do have quite a high turnover. That's not a bad thing in and of itself, in terms of staff coming and going through the organisation, so that isn't of high concern to me. In terms of agile working, I think the issue about people emailing at odd times of the day and night, it's certainly something that managers are aware of. I have some staff that I know their working patterns, and they tend to work more in the evening than they do earlier in the day because they have childcare issues, and that's the whole benefit of agile working. It gives them the opportunity to be there when their children need them, and then they work later on in the day. So is it unhealthy? No, not in that instance. There may be instances where people are working at ridiculous times, and I've had emails, gosh, I'm terrible. If I get up in the night to go and let my dog out, which I often do, then my phone is there, and I can guarantee you I'll check the emails. Just because, and sometimes I'll just check it, look at it and put it down. Other times I'll take 2 seconds and reply to an email there and then, and it might be 12, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. That's not my normal working pattern, but that's just what I do. And, I don't think that's detrimental to my health. If I have a concern about some of my employees, and I do, where I think, hang on a minute, they've been in work since 8:30 and they are still emailing at 9:30 at night, that is a real concern to me, and I would address that as a manager. And I would expect all managers to do that so that they know their staff, they know what their working patterns are, and if they do have concerns around how they are using agile working, or even forget agile working, just the way that they are working, then I would expect a manager to pick it up and deal with it.
I think really we're all victims of the society that we live in.
Absolutely.
I could just add to that, if I may, and yeah, that's absolutely the case. In terms of the first part of your question, Councillor Easton, just add that in terms of trying to redeploy, we work hard at that, and we have what we call an at-risk register, so people who are at risk of redundancy go onto a central register, if you like, and they have prior consideration as well for vacancy should they meet the person's specification criteria, so we're quite active on that. And on your second point, I just reiterate exactly what Tracy said and just give you an example, because I know we talk about agile working a lot. The HR team is very agile. Well-being is crucial. Some of them attend school meetings in the evening, etc. So it is my responsibility to make sure that the well-being is balanced. One of the ways that I do that in terms of incorporating our digital agenda is every Tuesday morning, literally for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes max, we have a Skype meeting, and one may be working from home that morning, one may be about to go to a school meeting, but we all Skype in and we check on well-being, who's covering what, if somebody can cover a meeting at the back end of the week, if 2 people are going to Abergavenny, for example, if somebody's got a difficult casework that may be getting them down in terms of well-being, making sure that that person has opportunity to discuss with another HR professional, or I meet myself in ESC, for example, to talk through. So, in terms of the agile working environment, there are mechanisms by which, as a manager, you can keep in touch on well-being and your staff's work programs.
Thank you. Are you happy with the response? Yeah. Before we move on to Councillor Davis, if I can just ask a small question on what's just been discussed. As far as leavers are concerned, Tracy, do we have a termination interview so that we can learn why people leave and, identify if there's any issues because, why people have decided to leave us?
Yeah, best practice. We do have an exit interview process, and managers are encouraged to interview and meet with the person who's leaving the authority before they leave, and go through the exit form with them to establish the reasons for leaving. Often it's promotion, often it's issues in terms of the employment. There's no options for career improvement, and all of those things are logged, and we've now got that information on our data dashboard that there is a link to on the document itself. So yes, we do it.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This issue that we're talking about is something that applies to all industries, not just local government. Something that I've been a manager, and it's something that we're all aware of. Some of those companies have actually brought in independent consultants, where people employed by a particular company can go, where they have no particular connection with the authority or the company concerned, because certainly some people are very reluctant to take forward their concerns to their line managers or anybody else, because they feel that might affect their careers in the future. Have you anything in place like that, which is totally independent? I don't mean that takes place within an MCC building, but somewhere where people can on their own just make the decision to use that facility, or are there plans to do it? The other question I've got is, thank you for the report. I'd like a little bit more detail. You've said you've done a lot of work, and there's a lot of analysis gone on, but I can't see that in this report. I haven't looked at your dashboard. I have spent some time looking at Enterprise recently, and I intend going through them all. I have to say I'm not very impressed with what I've seen there, because it doesn't tell me as a councillor the information that I want to access. But there's a number of interventions, and congratulations on those. I see you're all very concerned about this issue, because this not only puts pressure on the people that are sick, but it also puts pressure on the people that are not sick, because they've got to take that workload on, and then it can accumulate and then become more and more of a problem. So my other question is, how do we measure the interventions that we are putting in place, how effective they are? How do we know that they are actually making any difference? And that's the sort of things that I think as a committee we need to know. Yes, there's a number of interventions going on, but is it actually making anything better than it was before? Thank you.
Thank you. 2 excellent questions there, if you'd like to respond.
If I can take the last question, and then I'll get Sally to come in on the first part of your question. Yes, impact. I think I mentioned it in my introduction to the report. Measuring our impact is incredibly difficult. We look at best practice across the piece, across Wales and beyond, in terms of how we can improve our sickness management and reducing our sickness levels within the organisation. As a HR team, I've got 6 officers that support a workforce of up to 4,000. If you look at our schools, include our schools in that, we have 2 officers that support all of our schools. So it's, they're spread very thinly. So what we try to do is use digital means to support our managers by providing workflows, providing videos on how to conduct a return to work interview, sorry, I beg your pardon, I'm mumbling a bit, in terms of training on attendance management for all our managers. That is mandatory, and it picks up the issues of mental health and mental well-being. You know, it's some managers are much more emotionally intelligent than others, and they can spot when a problem is arising with a member of their staff, and they step in quickly, and the problem is alleviated, or is, you know, support is provided, whether or not it's through counselling or some other means to enable that staff member to remain in work. So in terms of analysis and impact, it is very difficult. I mentioned in my introduction that our sickness levels have remained the same. And for me, at this point in time, I can't tell you whether or not that is a positive, because we've put in a lot of effort in terms of the work that we've done to support managers, and it is about facilitating and supporting managers to deal with attendance issues, because HR, it's not our role to do it. And to be frank, there aren't enough of us to do it anyway. So we try and put all the support in place to enable managers to manage attendance better. We had issues around reporting of sickness, and that is improved. So the fact that our stats have remained the same is a positive, if you look at it from that basis, because if more people are reporting, then it could have gone up. So it's very difficult to measure our impact. We do look for more and more data and analysis, and one of the things that Sally and I will be doing shortly is looking at specific areas and looking at the age profile in a particular area, the gender profile, the sickness levels, the reasons for those sickness, and then saying, okay, right, we've identified, and I'll make it up, is that we've got a problem here. It's a predominantly female workforce. They're an ageing female workforce, and we're having a lot of long-term sickness for a specific reason, I don't know, gynecological. And we can then say, right, okay, well, we need now, in terms of workforce planning, and also in terms of attendance management, to recognise that and try and put systems in place to say, well, we may not be able to stop that absence, but perhaps we can minimise it or minimise the impact on the service better. So, you know, we are looking at doing those things, but it is very difficult because what we do is supporting, and to measure our impact and the activity, it is quite difficult. And the crude figure is sickness. It's the level of sickness that we've got.
You mentioned a number of things there. For example, mental health, we've all spoken about, is one element of a much bigger picture, because absence has a number of reasons. So I think the point I'm trying to make is, if we have a major new initiative on mental health, for example, and we have the data that there are X number of people who are, you know, suffering because of mental health, then we should be able to analyse whether that intervention is actually making any difference. Right? It may not make a difference to the overall, but within that category, it might have a significant impact. And when you analyse, I've worked under various managers, some of whom, you know, ought to have been a general in the army and had jackboots on, and others who were very understanding. So, I mean, you know, we need to focus on where are the problems, what are the reasons, and if we're going to put an intervention in, to me, there seems no point in putting an intervention in unless we're in a position where we can analyse whether it's going to be a success or not. Thank you.
I wholeheartedly agree, Councillor, and that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could now have the second part of that, the first part of the question answered. Thank you.
Yes, to answer that question, we do have access to an independent, confidential counselling service. It's called Wellbeing Solutions Wales. Previously, it was called Chemmies Grange. Some of you may be familiar with the terms, but that does provide our employees with access to independent counselling should they require it.
Does that take place within council premises, or does it take
No,
place?
it's in Newport. They're based in Newport.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question on that? I mean, if I went into an office and I asked members of staff there if they were aware of this, would I find that they all knew where to access this service?
That's a really good question. I think lots of people are familiar with it, but we don't have. It's not self-referral. It's referred. Our HR team will get involved, and so we don't. Obviously, there is. It does cost. There is a cost to the counselling service, so it's not on a self-referral basis. It's when an issue might be raised and discussed with the manager. The manager will approach HR, and we will refer because the manager does have to approve that cost. But I would provide the reassurance that it works very well. We get very good feedback from employees who receive the help from Wellbeing Solutions. So yeah, but it's not a self-referral basis.
Thank you. Are you happy with that response?
Can I just ask a question on that? What's the waiting list, please?
Sorry, Councillor Guppy, if we can just take Councillor
What's the
Davis.
waiting list? What's the waiting list for the
There is no waiting list. You'd get an appointment tonight.
Okay,
Well, the only
Councillor
comment
Davis.
I'd make, Chair, is that yet there again we have the issue of that individual having to approach their line manager, which is something that most individuals who are really suffering will not want to do.
That's a good point, and employees don't necessarily have to approach the line manager. They can come through to HR or somebody else, and we would facilitate that as long as we have a cost code that that there has to be some sort of accountability in terms of the cost. But they don't have to, and they don't always. Every situation is different, and I can assure you that not all employees have to go through their line manager.
If I could, just to add to that, I've had an incident recently where an employee, I was just dealing with an employee on a matter, and they clearly had some wellbeing issues, and I referred them to counsellor, and I said, would you like to go to see a counsellor and chat through some of the issues that you have, and nothing to do with any of my services, and I've organised that independently for him. So, there are mechanisms, so you don't have to just go through your manager.
Thank you. If I can now take Councillor Smith.
Chairman, a lot of emphasis on health absence. Can I ask, what is the percentage of attendance absence, whether it's sickness or just attendance? And also, if we look at the percentage of that, what is it actually costing us in money? How many millions?
To answer that, Councillor Smith, in terms of the sickness levels, it's 11.4 full days per full-time equivalent across the authority. And in terms of across Wales, that's pretty much the average. In terms of sickness levels, so 11.4 full-time, 11.4 days per full-time equivalent. Days are lost per year per employee. So that's the average, and that is pretty much the same across Wales. The best performing authority at the moment is Merthyr, and so we're now looking at Merthyr to see what they're doing to improve their sickness levels. I don't have the cost, I'm afraid. I can try and get that for you, but I don't have how much that's costing us.
Because that is over 2 weeks of additional absence from the job for whatever reason for every employee that we employ within Monmouth. Okay, so we haven't got a number for that. Guppy said she wasn't quite sure sort of what to do with this report. I actually gave it and said to a couple of people, have a look at this and tell me what you think, please. And there weren't very good comments, actually. There's a lot of information in one way, heavy going, a lot of clever language. No one's going to read it, Val. Initially good, then it went off. You've covered a lot of areas in there, and the very pointed question last night was, okay, Val, how much does this report cost to produce? How many man-hours went into it, Val? How much is this report actually costing me as a taxpayer? So I'll leave that happy little bundle with you folks. Regarding the production, yes, I've got a hard copy because I find I can follow these meetings better, Chairman, than on a screen. It's quite difficult in places to read with the background covers. I don't know how, well, I find green very difficult to focus on. I prefer bar charts to this one here, the length of service. That would give a truer indication. It's very easy to be critical. A lot of work's gone into it. As I say, my interest was, okay, folks, read this. And so if I can go back with answers to those individuals as to the time and the financial cost, I'd be grateful. Otherwise, I'm going to get worked over. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Okay. In terms of the time element, very little. The officers are involved in all of these services are measuring what they're doing all the time. So it's literally a case of pulling the information together. In terms of the format, this, as I said earlier, this is the second report of its kind. The first report we did last year, and it was very well received. It was in this format, and actually, it was a trial, and we were congratulated on the format of the report in terms of having a lot of information, some of it pictorial, some people like a lot of narrative, some people like pictures, and last year it was very well received. And apologies if it's not hitting people's buttons this year, but it is very much an analysis of the activity that we've done this year in response to evidence and data in terms of the issues facing the authority.
Can I ask who you really are aiming this at? Are we saying to the public, read this, or are we treating this internally?
Realistically, it's internal. It's a document that we take to our People Board, which is an open forum. It's chaired by Councillor Murphy, and it's where we have to report in terms of our activity through the year. So this report goes to that board. It has already gone to that board as analysis of activity to date, where again we can be challenged in terms of whether or not we're fulfilling the requirements of the organisation. But yes, it's also to engage with the workforce, as I put in my introduction. I'm very happy for anybody across the organisation to make any comments about issues that we need to address within People Services.
Can I just have one more bit, please, Chairman? Because the reference to check-in, check-out, that presumably is somebody's been absent, so they come back to work. Explain to me what check-in, check-out is, please.
Okay, apologies. It's a term that we use for our annual appraisal process. It's called check-in, check-out.
Right. So do we have a process whereby any staff who have been absent for whatever reason, when they return, meet with their line manager, and there's a brief sort of reasoning why, discussion, and there is a log kept of attendance?
Yeah, we have what's called a return to work interview. Our attendance management policy is that after every absence, an individual should have a formal return to work interview with their manager, where their reasons for absence are discussed, and also, it gives the opportunity for a conversation. So, for example, if somebody has been off with back problems, you can talk to them to say, well, actually, if you had a health assessment on your chair, maybe we need to get something done to your chair. So it offers the opportunity for a two-way conversation around the reasons for the absence. And then if I can go on from that, if there are other absences over a period, then there is another formal interview process that comes into play, again to talk about prolonged absence, reasons why, to try and understand if there are other issues at play, because people have home lives as well as work lives. So we do have a very formal process in place.
So is that process enforced every time for every absence, and then you build up a picture, you have a log of attendances for every employee?
Yes, that's the ideal. Not
the ideal.
Well, as I referred to earlier, we had an issue about managers recording sickness, and also an issue about some managers not undertaking a return to work interview. Our attendance management says that they should, and we obviously reinforce that, and but we don't always know if they don't take place.
I think, Chairman, that needs to be followed up seriously, because the impact of somebody being away for whatever reason impacts on other members of staff.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And also one has to question why some managers perhaps would choose not to put the sickness down, as it is a reflection on them if they've got a particular problem in their department. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. It follows on from what you were saying, as my colleague in front of me was saying, it was as she was talking, it was taking the words out of my mouth. It is concerning me, because one of the things that I picked up on you saying just now on health and wellbeing and attendance was that you both said it. All managers should treat and know their staff, as you outlined, and recognise the patterns of behaviour, as was discussed here as well. I'm just wondering, how are we ensuring that every single manager are aware of the staff movements, health, etc.? It says it's all very sort of, you're hoping, but how are we ensuring that they are trained that way, that they're all doing the same thing, and are there regular checks by HR, etc. on that? Thanks.
Okay, it's difficult. As I said, we've got 6 HR managers covering the whole of the authority. Attendance management training is mandatory. All managers must go on attendance management training, and through that process they are told about what they should do, the process that they should follow. We accept that some managers are better than others, and what we try to do through our analysis of data is to look at if we've got a problem area and think, well, actually, we seem to have high levels of sickness in this area, or there are eyes and ears. You get to hear if something's not quite right in a particular area, and then as HR we can go in and have a look at what's going on. We will focus on that particular area, and actually then go in and work with the manager. The manager may need further training. Some managers find it difficult to have difficult conversations, and so we would do some work with that manager to enable them to take action. Sal will talk about the partnering role, but what we would do is basically, if there are issues that are coming to light through the data, we would escalate them to that person's, that manager's line manager, so that they can start to address it formally with them as well.
Shall I? Thank you very much for that response. It does seem to be against what you were saying of being sort of, it seems to be more reactive than proactive, and you wanted to be more proactive than reactive. So I think you need to put in place, in my opinion, regular steps and regular checks on every manager, not just if, that's going wrong, let's go in and fix it. I think you should have regular checks to keep them updated, and maybe pair them up with a manager who's an example of good practice in this area, and so they can copy what they're doing, just something like that. Thanks.
I mean, first and foremost, and then I'm going to bring Sally in, is that we just haven't got the capacity to do that. There's 6 of us, there's 6 HR officers, and I'm trying to think how many managers that we've got. Our 200 managers. So, and 2 of those 6 officers are dedicated to schools. And we've got how many primaries and secondaries? 4.
Well, we support 2.
Yeah, we support 29 schools with 2 offices as well. So there is
spread incredibly thinly. So what we try to do is to give the tools and the skills to the managers to enable them to manage sickness appropriately, and not just manage sickness. It's managing development, every aspect of their staff's well-being. We would look for our manager to do that, and we try and put all the supporting things in place, and then we have to do it on a targeted basis. If information and data is coming to us to say something's wrong, and we do that analysis, then we will then target our intervention. Can I bring in Sal? Sal probably add to it on the ground.
Thanks, Trace. Just to add to the proactive rather than reactive. I'll give you an example. This year we have developed HR business partner relationship with managers. It's not the 200 managers, but it's a large selection across each directorate. And in that way, rather than a manager phoning up, on a Monday, then again on a Wednesday, we schedule in regular programme meetings. We use a template that has check-in, check-out, performance management, attendance, making so giving them a prompt around what they should be doing, so setting expectation. We talk through any problems that they may have. So the examples that Tracy was giving, difficult conversations, or perhaps they're a new manager and they haven't done a return to work. We might go along and assist that for the first or the second time. Again, to enable confidence for managers to be able to manage well and effectively. In terms of consequences then, if we find that the next meeting that we have with that manager, they're saying, oh, no, I'm still not doing my return to work, so I was a bit busy. Because I don't think we should assume that managers deliberately don't do things either within our organisation. We're talking about all of this activity around staff well-being, which is really important. People management, people are our greatest resource. I'm going to say that as HR manager, but these managers are extremely busy because they're delivering services as well. So we have to recognise that. But what I would say is that if after a few meetings, so the first month and the second month, so in other words, how are we tackling managers then, for example, who are not doing it? Well, that would raise, as part of this meeting, the business partner meeting, we would, a HR officer would red flag certain areas and, raise that, as Tracy's alluded, raise that with the next senior manager or even at a DMT, in terms of, that manager may need support. So there might be reasons that manager has, that the manager actually needs support and well-being and a possible referral to counselling themselves. They may have issues that are preventing, or it might just be that there is a willful refusal. So there's a range of scenarios here that HR help to address, but they're certainly not forgotten. And so these are proactive approaches rather than, if we didn't have the business partner meetings that are regularly programmed in, there is less likely that we can red flag them and raise them.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If I can first of all take Councillor Roden and then Councillor Smith.
Can I just come back on that really quickly?
Yes.
Just to say that we're all acutely aware of the staffing issues that you have, and obviously you can only do so much, and obviously the managers can only do so much. You don't want to increase their workload; they've got enough to do. But this is fundamental to what we're discussing. It is an important issue, and maybe there's some software solution that we can come up with on the managers to help managers red flag it more easily with staff, sort of having a checklist of things every few months of what's going on or whatever. Is there something like that?
Managers checklist, so that they are very clear about what their roles and responsibilities are in terms of managing people.
I meant on each individual person under the manager, so that they can see, this person's got a lot of sixes, or
they have access to sickness data on every single employee that they manage, and that's via our sickness dashboards. So that information is available to them, and we encourage them to, via their DMTs. And there are levels here. So, for example, if I look at my services, I've got a range of different services, and generally I know who's on the sick because my manager will tell me, oh, we're so small anyway, everybody, and but if, for example, there was a problem in Sally's area in terms of sickness, then she would know as in her own right. But then when we come together as a DMT, if there are sickness issues, I would discuss it either in a one-to-one with Sal, or if it was an issue that we needed to share some concerns, we would talk about it in the management team. So, it's not it doesn't just sit with that manager. There is a hierarchy, and sickness data goes to all levels.
Thank you. Are you happy with that? Councillor Roden, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was really encouraged to see that you're using College Gwent to do health MOTs on employees. I think that's a great thing to do. Preventative actions taken early can prevent sickness, so you're to be congratulated on that. It mentions some physical measurements that are taken, but it didn't mention anything about mental well-being assessment, and I wonder if that's actually part of that scheme. As a question of, and secondly, what percentage of staff are taking up the opportunity, and how you encourage them to take up the opportunity? That's the first question. And the second, if I may, you mentioned at the start that you were evidence-based, which is great to see as well. The surveys that you put out, they elicited a fairly low response. So I'm just wondering why you felt that was occurring, and also what you could do to increase the response. I do surveys all the time as a councillor, and I find them very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of questions there. In terms of the health at MOT, that's something that it's fairly new, so we haven't got huge amounts of data on that yet. I can't answer the question whether or not mental well-being is included in that assessment, but I can find out for you, and I don't have numbers around that. But that is something that we've reintroduced as listening to our colleagues. They've told us we used to do all the physical tests around blood pressure, cholesterol, etc., and they felt that we needed to reintroduce that. So that's in response to what our colleagues are telling us. And in terms of, sorry, the second point that you made, it's just gone totally out of my mind.
It's about the surveys.
Okay, in terms of the surveys, the actual response that we got was over 700 colleagues responded to the questionnaire, which is statistically significant. But nevertheless, when you've got 4,000 employees or 3,000 corporate employees and then schools on top of that, I would have liked to have seen a better response. So we do encourage staff to respond to the survey when the survey is sent out. Generally, the chief exec sends it out and encourages people to respond. And as the deadline for responses approaches, reminders are sent out to all staff to encourage them to respond, because whatever they say to us helps us in terms of forming our actions. We also have something that's called Mon Minds, where a range, and it's referred to in the document, where basically we have a range of colleagues from across the organisation who come together to talk about issues that are affecting the whole organisation. So we are gathering evidence and data, not just through surveys, through a whole range of things. We have an organisational development manager, and she goes out and she will go out into a particular service area and just get to know people, get to know and get to understand some of the issues that are affecting them, so that we can bring those back and again act on them corporately to try and improve the well-being of our workforce.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Roden? I would just like to add a couple of comments of my own. I'm very concerned about the levels of sickness, especially the cost to the council, and I feel that the fact that people haven't responded to a staff survey is really a bit of a red flag. I think it tells the council that maybe employees feel, well, there's no point in me responding because nothing's going to happen anyway. So I think, the report for me, it's very interesting read, but I'd have liked to have seen less use of abbreviations and language that's difficult to understand. I would like to have seen more detail about sickness levels and where in which departments people are being sick. And although I think it's brilliant that we're offering these courses, what concerns me is if you have a situation where there's a department of, say, 2 people who are under pressure, it's almost impossible for one of those people to go on a course. I'm also not convinced about this Wellbeing Solutions Wales. Any of us that have worked for large companies for 15, 20 years, most companies, and I think most of our surrounding councils, neighbouring councils, do now have a company called Care First, which the councils have invested in, that employees can actually access without having to go through a line manager. If you've got a line manager that you don't get on with and he's causing you mental stress, you're hardly likely to go to him to discuss it. So I think that there's still an awful lot to do, and I think that in a climate of squeezed budgets, incredible pressure on staff, we really need to value our staff and make sure that we retain them and really look at solutions to the problems that we've got. I don't know whether you'd like to comment on any of that. It's not really a question, but an observation.
I think, my overriding comment would be, I totally agree. There's still huge amounts to do. We've got a reducing workforce. Our workforce are our greatest asset. The well-being of our workforce is our priority, as is indicated by the priority being attendance management and health and well-being. We are looking at options all the time in terms of best practice of what we can do to improve the well-being of our workforce and attendance. And we will continue to do so. But I take on board the points you made about some of the acronyms that are used in the document, and apologies for that, because I think we were using a template that we'd used previously that was well received. I appreciate it's a new audience, and we appreciate the comments that you're making. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add anything else before we complete this agenda item? Well, thank you very much indeed, members, for your input there, and also for the officers for coming along and presenting it. Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to agenda item 8, which is the review of commercial obstructions in the highway policy. And we have a member of the public we're very pleased to see attending. Thank you for your patience with us today. Would you like to speak to the members on this item? If you'd like to, would you like to come down here? Yeah. You're very welcome to stay, members from the People Services, or if you want to make a move, then we totally understand you're very busy.
We have the volunteer policy.
Oh, you're coming to that next? So, yeah, okay, fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I think if you'd like to introduce yourself to the members, and we'd be very happy to hear what you'd like to say to us. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Damien Cole. I'm the Managing Director of Get Connected, based in Abergavenny. We have nearly 60 retail stores throughout England and Wales, one of which is in Abergavenny and our head office. And we also have a coffee shop in Abergavenny as well. We employ nearly 200 people. And just one comment, if I could, on the last agenda item, is you all talked about the negativity of people being sick. Not once was it mentioned about people who do come to work and come every day. We reward our staff for attendance. And I think if you turned it round with the council and started recognising the people that do turn up for work, you'd find that your sickness would decrease massively. We hardly have any sickness at all in our company because we pay, everybody gets a 3% commission attendance bonus every month. And it's far cheaper to pay people a little bit more money and not have any sickness. Yeah. And I don't know what it's costing the council, but you could have you could have a fund. For example, if you put up I don't know if you could legally do it, but if you put up a £20,000 prize every month, and if you have a day sick, you're not in the draw anymore. At the end of the month, however many people are left in the draw, a name gets pulled out and they win the money. You'd only have to do it once, and I bet you'd have hardly any sickness.
Thank
when
you for that comment. I actually worked for a company many years ago called Hotpoint, and we actually got a week's extra holiday if we weren't off sick during the year. So that worked very well. So if you'd like to, thank you for that comment, and if you'd like to give us your presentation about the highways obstruction, thank you.
Yeah, our coffee shop in Abergavenny is in St John's Square, next to the King's Arms pub. It's called Get Together. There's quite a lot of businesses in Abergavenny because it's quite a sort of a cosmopolitan cafe culture now, and there's a lot of businesses without outside seating. We have 6 benches outside our premises. The Monmouthshire County Council adopted local development plan from 2014, which is running up until 2021. Actually says a key objective of the development plan, therefore, is to sustain and enhance the county's main towns as vibrant and attractive centres. This is vital in ensuring that the centres remain attractive places to live and visit. I think with the council looking to implement charges for A-boards outside business premises and charging for outside seating, I think the council would be far better off working with the businesses in Abergavenny to encourage more visitors rather than financially penalising them by charging for seating outside. Because a lot of, I talked to the owner of Harry's Bar yesterday, which is a small takeaway food establishment in Abergavenny. He's only got probably 6 stools inside because it's a very small premises. He's got tables outside, and he said it would absolutely cripple his business if he couldn't have the tables outside because he can only serve very, very few people then. We have a lot of people coming to our coffee shop with bikes, especially on the weekend, and dogs, and sitting outside on the benches. There was a fortune spent in Abergavenny to make the town look presentable for the Eisteddfod and to alter St John's Square, and it does look lovely now. And when you've got people sat outside the King's Arms, Get Together, the Trading Post, Coffee Number 1, Cafe Nero's further down into town, Costa Coffee, I think it would be a real shame if all that seating started disappearing if charges were implemented.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sure that we, take very seriously the comments that you've made to us. Obviously, we are now going to have a look at the report, and Roger, are you leading on this? So I now asked Roger to present the report to everybody. Thank you.
press mute button. I would say that, as I said before, previous consultation was extensive and prolonged, and the concept of permitting amongst businesses was to maintain this safe route. My perception at the time, because there's a great deal of feedback, be it through letters or through social media in particular, when the scheme was paused, it wasn't so much about the scheme by way of permitting businesses, it was around the charge. So what I'm asking members at the moment is to provide me with feedback, whatever that may be, to take back to Cabinet, so as they may reconsider the policy and whether or not they wish to see it changed. I appreciate that your feedback may be to simply recommence the existing policy, which is, as I say, the permit policy with a charge. Or it may be to make some adjustment, and possibly that's in relation to the charge structure. I've provided in the report the current approved charging regime. The charge is intended to support the administration which goes with this scheme. And just to outline that a little bit, the previous scheme was a universal scheme. It didn't matter whether you're in the wide open spaces of St. John's Square or tucked in Church Street in Monmouth or wherever you were, it was a universal scheme. So it had no flexibility. This allows flexibility because officers will go to each individual business that wishes to put out an A-board as by way of advertising, or to place displays or place coffee tables within the public highway, and work with them about what can be achieved whilst maintaining that safe route. I'd also say that when we did the consultation, it included consultation with representatives from partially sighted groups, disabled groups, and it was a wide consultation. But I hope that is sufficient background to where we find ourselves, and I would welcome feedback from the committee in order that I can inform the next Cabinet meeting about what we do with this policy.
Thank you very much, Roger, for giving us that background and making it quite clear as what you're trying to achieve today. So if we could have feedback from members on this, and if we could take questions and feedback. So who would like to kick off? Councillor Jones.
Thank you to the Member of Public for coming in, and also what you said, Roger. The scheme is significantly better in that it wants to help individual basis, a business on an individual basis. But how much is the cost? Just quickly before I can have a come back on this. What is the charge?
The charges, I'll briefly run through them. The charge within the approved policy at the moment, the one which has been paused, is for a business which wishes to display an A-board. The A-board has to be to what we say it would be, so it can't be the size of a teepee. It's got to be what we say it is, and it has to have certain things in relation to reflective surfaces, so as partially sighted in particular can see it. But the charge for that is a one-off charge of £50 for the A-board. So that is to process the administration, meet the business, do the permit, do the plan, which shows what they are allowed to do, and allow them to display that. So the public can also see that that has been agreed. So it's a one-off charge for an A-board. In terms of seating and displays, there's a single application charge of £125, a one-off charge. Thereafter, for an area up to 6 square metres, there's an annual charge of £120. For areas 6 to 12 square metres, there's an annual charge of £240. And for an area of 12 to 18 square metres, there's a charge of £360. Now, there's the difference when we put this together. When this first came together, there was a proposed an annual charge for A boards. However, members asked us to reflect upon that, and we look back on that. An A board may be considered purely as an advertising opportunity, whereas displays, tables, chairs and the like actually increase the available retail space of the business. So as such, and as they are using the public highway, it seemed reasonable that for that there should be some recompense back to the local authority or to the public for so doing. And this is common with other authorities. And that money is then used for us to manage the scheme, because we're now doing this on an annual basis with those places.
Thank you, Roger. I see what you're saying. Personally, I don't agree with the charge. I agree. I know there are some administrative costs, but if they could be kept to an absolute minimum, then that's fine, because there are a lot of financial pressures on our small businesses. And you say other councils charge for the space, etc., but other councils aren't highly rural authorities like us who are desperately trying to get people into our town centres. We need to encourage and support our businesses in any way possible, particularly, as you said, with the high business rates. And so just whacking another cost on them is, in my opinion, not the way forward. I think that we should be lenient on that, because we want to encourage, as you said, more people coming into those small businesses, as the gentleman said, having more capacity to serve people. And so on. So I do think that we need to relook at this. I mean, it's my personal opinion, but I do think that we need to be doing everything humanly possible in this authority to put our small businesses first, because without them, our town's going to die, and significant impact, obviously, the roll-on effect of that. So I do think that it's something that we shouldn't be just money grabbing in this way. I think that we really should bring down the cost as far as we humanly possibly can.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that, Roger?
I'm grateful for the feedback, and that will be fed back to Cabinet as and when they take the decisions. The only point I would raise is the charge is intended to pay for the administration costs of carrying out this work. In the last debate, we talked about the pressure upon staff to do it, and we're in a similar situation. And I can only reiterate the previous policy. The only costs incurred were for staff to go out and enforce, those to physically take stuff away. We are now going to work with individual businesses. This raises, I believe it's in the region of £10,000 to £15,000, depending upon which way you want to do it. And that is by way of contribution towards the costs of doing it and finding staff available to do it. But as I've asked for feedback, I will provide that feedback to Cabinet.
Thank you. Councillor Guppy, and then Councillor Davis and Councillor Smith.
It's a great dilemma what you're going to do about the charges. I think they are high charges for small business. We want businesses in. Something needs to be done about it. And just for instance, with the seating capacity, in a first application, £125. Then the annual renewal, the minimum is £120. Well, what's that for? £5 less for just renewing it? It doesn't make sense to me. I think maybe we need to reduce these charges. I agree with that we need a policy. It makes everything fair and not spats between one town and another town. This is happening here and another. It's a policy. It's good practice. It's good communication between the public, business, and the council. But we need to do something about the business. Monmouthshire needs to celebrate this business, not sort of put charges on them.
Thank you. If we can take now, Roger, did you want to respond to Councillor Guppy?
I believe it's, Madam Chairman, I believe it's a similar theme to that made by Councillor Jones, so the same feedback will go.
Thank you, Councillor Guppy. If I can take Councillor Davis next.
Thank you, Chair. I think, there has to be a balance here, because what we can't have is a free-for-all of businesses placing stuff willy-nilly on the highway, which is a danger to people. I totally agree with the comments about small businesses. They're the lifeblood of our communities. We need to do everything we can to encourage them. Our town centres are dying. If you look at Caldicot, for example, there's more and more businesses closing. I don't think we should be putting a charge on this. I appreciate that there is work involved for the council, but we spoke earlier on about things that the council can do perhaps to save costs and improve their financial flow. And I think we ought to be looking at that, not charging small businesses. On the other hand, there has to be a system where we must inspect and make sure that the system is not being abused. So I would concur with the other members. My recommendation to Cabinet would be not to charge for this particular thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. So, Councillor Smith and then Councillor Roden.
Yes, Chairman. Just to make sure in my mind, the A boards, your new the thinking now is that there would not be a charge for A boards, Roger? Have I not read the report right?
It's so,
the one off.
It's how long's a piece of string, quite frankly, in terms of how you may re-establish this and restructure it. I've purely put down a suggestion which might be not to charge for A-boards on the basis it's purely advertising, whereas for those people placing out displays, placing out tables, placing out chairs, they are actually increasing their retail space. There's a real value to those businesses by doing so, and as such, and as they were using the public highway, in line with many other authorities, I would have suggested that a charge be imposed to cover the administrative costs. I would suggest that if we were to sit down and work with Mr. Cole to look at the benefits of those in terms of income, it would be an interesting exercise to work out what's the value of having those extra seats in terms of income to that business versus the actual charge being imposed.
Can I come back, Chairman, please? So the A boards would be of a sensible design, we could say. They're not going to be the ones that you trip or blow over, so not too worried about those. That's a fluid one. Looking at the charges that are proposed, why should we want to make charges? Administrative costs. To ensure the safety of the routes for pedestrians so that you know where you can actually have a layout, and for the council to have a control, because if we don't, you could find somebody decided one Saturday morning they'd put 20 chairs out right across Cross Street or somewhere. So we do have to have a control. So there's a safety aspect that you can't put chairs everywhere and tables everywhere because people who are visually impaired or people with prams will bump into them. You've got a safety one, you've got to control the admin costs to ensure responsible behaviour, because the gentleman in front of us who's come to make a very good point that he doesn't think it's on, you obviously behave in a responsible and a caring way, you care about your staff, and you've come forward with a very interesting suggestion as well on a different policy for us. So, I mean, it's a very good turnout. I don't think the charges are unreasonable because, as the officer is saying, you hopefully incur extra business by having your tables outside, increases your business. The A boards remind people that, yeah, we're there, but not such a good benefit as a table and some chairs to sit at and to drink. So your first charge on your first area works out at £3 a week. The second one, which is your 6 by 12 square metres, that's £3 a week, then £6 a week. And for a fair slab of pavement, you're getting £9 a week. And you're going to get increased trade. We have control, we're doing it right and proper, and I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to be embarking on, Chairman. We cannot afford to incur any extra any charges. So, yes, I'm at complete variance with my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. If we can have Councillor Roden and then Councillor Eason and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I've had some emails from visually impaired people and also a conversation with two, and they find A boards difficult as they walk down the street. The issue that they have is that the A boards are not kept in the same spot on the pavement. If we were to improve their lives by fixing a site, I think that would be of benefit. You could mark something on the ground where the A boards could fit, and they would experience that they're able in the same place every time they go down the street. That would be of benefit. Therefore, we do need to have some kind of control. I think that's very important. In terms of charges, we've mentioned that businesses are struggling. One of the reasons this was dropped before was the increasing rates that were very, very high for some people. And maybe we could look at it slightly differently in terms of layering the charges, so that if you're a large national chain, would it work? It's an idea anyway. Perhaps we could charge more. Perhaps we could do it on the class of the business. That's another way of looking at it. You mentioned Church Street earlier. You've got Phil Monday. I would hate to see that business go from that street. And similarly with Stephen's Bookstore. Both of them have some street presence, and it's valued by the majority of the people in Monmouth, I'm sure. I wouldn't like to see them impacted by the pricing that you're talking about. So, a method for perhaps spreading any charges, perhaps when you collect rates, for example, if it has to be paid for, rather than doing it as a upfront hit, it might be better to put it over a longer period of time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roden. Did you want to respond to any of those points, or have you just made a note of them?
At this stage, Madam Chairman, if I may summarise on where I believe the committee has got to. Just to make it clear, I'm hearing that members do not wish to see the permit scheme removed, but that the importance of maintaining and controlling the whatever displays are there and the safe route is of importance. I do want to make a point around that just at the moment, because I think it's important to do so. And members may want to reflect upon this as well. The scheme says up to a maximum of 18 square metres, 3 by 6 metres, in Imperial 10 foot by 20 foot. Now, there are some areas, some present businesses which are on footprints larger than that in the street. So those will be affected by this, unless you say, I want you to look at that control again. So physically, and I know one of the businesses in St. John's Square might be affected by that, I'm not sure. And I would also say that when this is actually enforced, some of these items in the street will go anyway, because it's our responsibility to maintain a safe highway. At the moment, we are responding to complaints and demands from the public. But on the basis of maintaining a 1.4 metres safe route, then certain displays are going to go in any event when we start to proactively implement this scheme. So I just need to make that point. But ultimately, as responsible for the public highway, we have to maintain a route. So I just need to make that point. So I'm hearing that we retain the permit scheme. But there's some disagreement about that. There's some members believe the charge to be unreasonable under current economic circumstances, whereas other members consider the charge is reasonable, and a member was looking for some sort of spread in charge. I would say in relation to a charge for a national and not for an independent could be a little bit difficult. I know of 1 or 2 coffee shops which have only got a few, but are they a national or are they now an independent? And you get into that difficulty. And quite frankly, what's the basis of a policy which says you treat one business different to another like that? So I won't. That's my initial response to that. We would look at that as well. At this stage, Madam Chairman, that's what I've received.
Thank you. If we can now, Councillor Easton, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. We spent many torturous hours on this matter in the last council, I tell you. And at the end of the day, I don't think anybody's really content with the result we got. But one of the things we did discuss was restricting some of the traffic through these particular areas to give more public space for walking. There was a scheme planned for Monmouth on shared space, because Monmouth is a very wide street. We felt the ways of reducing the traffic movements to make more space for the people to on the shops and other things. You could do that in Abergwen. You could close the whole of the road from Frogmore Street right back past the old cinema, or it's Wetherspoons now. And the part you're talking about is St John's, isn't it? That's by the post office. Places like that. If we could create shared access for pedestrians and reduce the need for traffic to move over them, it would enhance the public's ability to walk. It would then make it easier for people with disabilities, equally disabilities, to get about. So in terms of, somebody keeps ringing me, in terms of charging, we weren't happy then and we're not happy now. Administrative charges to set things up may be a question mark, I don't know, but we did discuss this. We weren't content with what we got really at the end of the day. It went through Cabinet and it caused a lot of concern. In Caldecott, where I come from, we felt there was no need for anything there because we've got a pedestrianised area, there's plenty of places for people to walk, and we felt that may be the sort of model you could have for Abergwenny and particularly Monmouth. Usk is a very difficult one.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Only there was an easy solution to ask. It's gone years and years and years of going around in circles on that one, I think. But yes, I agree with what my colleague said, actually, about that's an interesting thing to look into, the shared access and then increasing the spaces. Because I think that's what you're alluding to in terms of the distance needed, etc. So I think we should look more into that. But instead of charging, which I am still opposed to, what about if people are recurringly being naughty? I mean, we've got to obviously keep it, give the advice. I love what you're doing in terms of going and doing an individual plan for the businesses. I know there's some cost to that, but I do think that is something that we should be doing anyway. And you're giving the advice, if someone comes and blatantly is going against that and doing something naughty, then a fine perhaps, and that maybe could go into sort of paying for your administrative costs. But these charges for a business who's trying to set up and trying to do its best, I just can't stomach it, I'm afraid. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Has anybody changed their opinion this morning after the discussion and from Roger's comments at all?
No, I was just what Roger said about the area. I can't find the measurements in the report.
Page 89, 5, resource implications, and there's a table underneath.
You said that there will be some businesses that, by adopting this policy, that would it could dramatically reduce the areas of what they're already doing now. So I couldn't find that.
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Sorry.
I'm just highlighting it to you. In the vast majority of cases, this isn't going to be an issue, but there are one or two which I suspect are going to have to curtail the extent of their outside displays, tables, chairs as a result of this. And I just want you to be aware of that, so as this doesn't come as a shock to members as and when, because what is going to happen when this is proactively adopted, we will then start proactively implement it, and we will be going out to the towns and saying that's no longer allowed. You cannot put that by there. This is all you've paid, well, not paid for or paid for, that's a decision to be taken, but this is the extent of your permit. You cannot go further than that. There will undoubtedly be an adverse reaction to that, I suspect. So I believe you should be familiar with that. The charge basis on going up to a maximum, and that's the point that I wanted to make clear.
Is that what it is, where you've got the maximum and 18, that's where it's going to be incurred?
Yeah, I don't overstress this, but I do know of one or two. Practically, by walking around, I think you're never going to squeeze that into 3 meters by 6 meters. I think that's something you should be aware of. and also that in some instances, irrespective of the permit scheme, our responsibility as the local authority and the highway authority is to maintain a safe route. So some displays will go anyway. I won't mention us, but you know, that's a reasonable example. I think in terms, if I may just quickly, Madam Chairman, in terms of the shared space, it's a great idea. If you've been to Abergavenny recently, we spent £1 million down through St John's Square, down through Neville Street into High Street, and we are in the midst of doing plans to go on down into Lion Street, down into Frogmore Street as well. So it's a point well made, and that does really almost encourage this cafe culture to come forward, and it gives us much greater flexibility to do that. But to await that, we could be a long time, and you have to have a policy around this at the moment because we haven't got one which we're actively pursuing.
Can I ask, what about Monmouth in this aspect that you're looking at?
In relation to Monmouth, we are looking at whether or not we can do a more, I'll call it pedestrian-friendly arrangement in Agincourt Square. If you want to go down Mono Street, we want to get out your checkbook, quite frankly, because we haven't got the money available to go down through there. Nevertheless, maybe there's work we can do around widening pavements at the same time. But quite frankly, although we're looking at Agincourt Square and the infamous narrowing, there is a much bigger scheme if we're going to go down Mono Street. Church Street, as Councillor Roden mentions too, is already largely pedestrianised in any event.
Councillor Roden.
Thank you. Roger, how did the maximum area for seating, etc., be determined? How was it?
The officers, before we came forward with the recommendations, we looked across at what other authorities were doing in terms of the type of areas which they were allowing, and we followed their lead, quite frankly, in many instances. If you were to wish to go further than that, then you have to consider that within the context of what impact it has upon the streetscape, quite honestly. It is, by the time you've allowed a safe pedestrian route and you've got that display or layout of tables and chairs, you've got quite a significant area taken up. So to increase that, it may be feasible, but you would have to rely upon your officers to say, in this instance, Mr. Retailer, we're only allowing up to 12 square metres because we have to maintain this route all the time. But there may be feasibility about allowing above that.
There we are. If people wanted larger areas and the space would allow it, I can't see any reason to restrict it. And in those cases, where they were going for very large areas, I think that it would be reasonable to have a charge for that because there's extra workload due to the council. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to provide the feedback that at least one member's mentioned the concept of having a larger footprint. In terms of workload, it'd be the same, quite honestly, whether it's up to 6 square metres or whether it's up to 26 square metres. For the officer, they visit the individual premise, they take the scheme to them in the first place, they allow the individual to look at that, they allow the individual to come back to them, they then go and meet the individual, prepare the plan, issue the plan, do or do not do the invoicing, and then put the scheme in place. So whether it's a large one or a small one, the workload is largely about the same.
Would anybody else like to make any other comments? Yes, certainly, if you'd like to come back, Damien.
One thing, there's a hidden cost with A-boards if the council are going to issue a standard spec that must be adhered to. It wouldn't just be a £50 charge. Every business would then have to buy a new A-board, which could cost £100, £200, £300, depending on the spec. So that's another cost to be taken into consideration. And I think there's a difference between looking at Usk and looking at Abergavenny. Usk, you've got a main road straight through it with narrow pavements. Abergavenny is, quite a lot of it is pedestrianised. There's plenty of room for seating where it's situated at the moment, and I really think in Abergavenny that there isn't really a problem at the moment with seating, and I think saying there's going to be a cost to administer a scheme, you're only incurring the cost for the sake of it, really, because I don't see that there is a problem in Abergavenny that needs dealing with. Everybody is, I think, more than sensible with where they've got seating at the moment. And A-boards as well, I don't really see that there's much of a problem. You've got somewhere like, for instance, Cafe Nero's that are on the main, the road through with traffic. I think they may put a couple of little chairs outside, but they're not blocking the pavement. They haven't got picnic benches outside their premises because there simply isn't room for it. They'd be on the road. So everybody is being sort of sensible about what they're doing and just everybody's trying to make a living and bring people into the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back? Yeah.
The point that Mr. Cole makes about the A-boards is well made. We know how much these things can cost. We've been told how much they can cost. We would work with the individuals where they exist to try and at least improve them by way of visibility, reflective markings or whatever, just so as they stand out. So, and we would, this point we understand. I'd have to say in some instances, some of the A-boards are, even then, are probably, well, maybe unacceptable given their size and the nature of how they're designed, but maybe, you know, a proposal to be changed over the next 2 to 3 years might be acceptable to achieve that with those businesses. So we do understand that, and we are looking to work with businesses and not to try and dissuade businesses from doing this. The only point I would say, I would tend to agree that in Abergavenny, given the nature of Abergavenny, and particularly the works we've done there recently, it lends itself much better to other places. But to have an Abergavenny specific policy doesn't really work. We, as an authority, you need a policy. And what we've done by working with individual businesses is allows us as officers to work with actually individual businesses within the town. So you can work with them specifically to allow this to happen. Because generally, I think I would tend to agree with Mr. Cole, in the pedestrianised areas it's not a problem. That being said, when you get down the street towards Kibby Walk, if there's anything down there, it's getting a lot narrower. And we are, don't never forget, sorry to emphasise this, but our responsibility as the highway authority is to maintain a safe route. But this tries to find a way through both, to support both. If members think it's unreasonable to levy a charge for that, then obviously that's something I can feed back. I know there's been different views taken about that, and I can feed all that back to Cabinet. But I hope we're making clear what we're trying to do here. That's okay.
Thank you. I'd just like to add a couple of points. I mean, I think we've discussed seating, but also, I mean, I left the theatre in Abergavenny on Saturday night, and I walked past your premises, and it was great. There were loads of people outside. It was the busiest part of Abergavenny. I think you've got to remember there's not only people sitting, there's more people standing. And there was a tremendous amount of people, and the amount of people there, certainly I wouldn't have wanted to have walked through them. But there's plenty of room, you don't have to. But in some places that could cause an issue. And I think we'll have to work closely with our colleagues in licensing when we're looking at these premises to make sure that we get the right balance. And of course, we want to encourage businesses to have, you know, every opportunity. But as well, we've got to look at the safety aspect as well and the impact on other people in the town too. Because I'm thinking about residents as well. If there's a lot of people outside, and you've got to think about people that live there and all those other things. But I think there's been some very interesting feedback. Can we just have a sort of a bit of a straw poll on just a show of hands on who thinks that we should have charges, first of all? And those who feel that we shouldn't. there just as a feedback for you, Roger. Well, thank you very much indeed, members, and thank you very much, Damien, for coming along. It's been very valuable to have you here today, and thank you for your input. Thank you. Yeah. Would you like a 2-minute break, members, before we move on to volunteering policy? Just a 2-minute break. Thank you.